Hi, welcome to the PowerPoint on biological and psychological trait theories of crime. This is part one. Part one covers biological trait theories of crime. Part two covers psychological trait theories of crime and measurement issues. Biological and psychological trait theories assume that there are basic differences that distinguish criminals from non-criminals. This is different from other theories of crime. The history of trait theories, most theories of crime are based on the idea that crime occurs because people choose out of quote-unquote free will to commit crime. This understanding of crime is largely due to positivism, which as a scientific method emphasizes observation in advancing science. Positivists believe that forces beyond individual control influence behavior, though. This is called determinism. Positivists also believe in the scientific method. That method emphasizes observation and other information gained from the five senses. The first positivist theories focus on biological explanations of crime. This included phrenology. As you can see on the PowerPoint slide, that's an example of a phrenological head where different points on the head were thought to correspond with different personality traits, and by measuring points on the head, you could get an understanding of how likely someone was to have these certain traits. Later on, the Nazis also tried to advance phrenology as an explanation for crime and other traits that they did not care for. Eventually, such explanations, phrenological explanations were rejected. In the 1970s, more rational biosocial theories recognized biology and the social environment as combined being the causes of criminal behavior. Many of these theories also integrated the work of Sigmund Freud into their explanations. You may have heard of the nature versus nurture debate. This debate is over whether our personality is derived from genetics, nature, or the environments we grow up and exist in, nurture. No surprise, this debate exists in criminology too. Trait theories are on the nature side of this debate. One of the first theories that we'll talk about is that of genes and supercriminals. The idea that there are quote-unquote supercriminals is based on biological understandings of the nature of crime. These supercriminals were men who had XYY chromosomes instead of just XY chromosomes. Little evidence supported this theory up until the 1970s. However, in the 1970s, due to a variety of factors, this theory took prominence for a time. For more on the factors that contributed to the rise of the theory of supercriminals in the 1970s, check out the YouTube video that is linked to on the slide. More recent research, however, has pointed to the evidence that men with such chromosomes are more likely to be nonviolent criminals than men with only XY chromosomes. So we don't think anymore that men with XYY chromosomes are likely to be violent supercriminals. But more recent research, has shown that men with XYY chromosomes are more likely than men with XY chromosomes to be nonviolent criminals. Even so, though, researchers cannot state why men with XYY chromosomes would be more likely to be criminals. Instead of focusing on a gene that causes criminality, modern theories focus on biosocial conditions, brain chemistry, hormone levels, arousal levels, neurological conditions, and evolutionary psychology. In short, they focus on how biology impacts behavior, not thinking that biology is the sole cause of behavior. Once we start looking at theories that are biological trait theories examining the relationship between brain and behavior, we start to look at the relationship between neurotransmitters and aggression, and theories involving the structure of the brain. One avenue of research suggests that brain chemistry impacts behavior. This research has focused on aggression, specifically neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are the chemicals, including dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine, that carry information to the brain. Studies have found that low levels of serotonin are correlated to lower impulse control and thus aggressive behavior. Hormones, especially testosterone, are also known to increase aggression. Finally, there's research that states that there's a relationship between psychological states and physiological responses, including many studies that note that criminals have very low levels of arousal. This may be because they have lower levels of fear, which reduce their fear of punishment. It could also be that such individuals go to seek stimulation through crime. This hypothesis is called the stimulation-seeking theory. Another avenue of research points to structural differences in the brains of some criminals and the non-criminal population. Charles Whitman, whom some call the first to perpetuate a mass terror shooting in the United States, was one of these individuals. He had a brain tumor that quite literally changed the physical shape of his brain. Similarly, some studies have looked at the prefrontal lobe functioning and found that poor functioning is present in criminals more frequently than in non-criminals. You can follow the link to the YouTube video to see more about Charles Whitman, but there's a warning. The video contains many graphic images. Next, we can look at trait theories that involve evolution. Some trait theories have said that criminals are actually individuals who have evolved quote-unquote better. Men in particular who are criminals are interested in producing many offspring at a low cost, and thus are not devoted so much to human emotion. They don't care about the impact of their behavior as criminals. They don't care about the impact of their behavior as absent fathers. So thus, they're more likely to commit crime. This is a low-cost offspring theory. Second, there's the theory that's referred to as cads and dads. This theory states that men may be more deceptive and selfish than women, and thus more likely to commit crime, i.e., men are cads, women want dads. One of the most studied biological trait theories is that which involves the role of neurotransmitters. As discussed in the readings, the levels of neurotransmitters in the brain may directly or indirectly relate to aggression and antisocial behavior due to serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. But neurotransmitters cannot be measured directly in the brain, so they have to be measured through spinal fluid, blood, or urine. Spinal fluid measurements are the most reliable, but they are difficult and expensive because they require a lumbar puncture, inserting a needle in the area around the spinal cord. Not to mention they are dangerous and painful. Even spinal fluid measurements can't measure neurotransmitters directly. They can only measure the chemical precursors or byproducts of the actions of neurotransmitters in the brain. This complicates studies because neurotransmitters may create different reactions in different parts of the brain that we are unaware of. which complicates determining which part of the brain is responsible for which actions. Meta-analysis of studies that look at the effects of serotonin find a negative correlation with antisocial behavior and psychiatric problems when serotonin is measured via spinal fluid. No relationship has been found via dopamine and antisocial behavior. These results, or at least the results of the studies involving serotonin, sound promising, but they have drawbacks. We cannot draw firm conclusions from these studies. Most of the studies use only a single measure of neurotransmitters. Furthermore, the indirect ways that neurotransmitters have been measured severely limit the researchers' ability to determine how neurotransmitters work to influence aggression, and we do not believe that they act similarly or act in all areas of the brain. So we need studies that show more directly what areas of the brain are affected and how this activity translates into antisocial or aggressive behaviors. Secondly, neurotransmitters are typically studied in isolation, but neurotransmitter systems are complex, and they interact with each other. In short, this is like trying to study the interactions of a group of people, like a college club, by only studying the actions of one person within the club, and not even looking at how that person interacts with other members of the same club. Future research may look more specifically into the role of neurotransmitters in criminal behavior in order to determine how neurotransmitters at a low level can lead to heightened aggression, which can lead to individuals committing crimes. Let's talk about biological trait theories that include hormonal theories of crime. Men commit crimes more than women, especially violent crimes. One theory attributes this difference to hormones, androgens, the most common of which is testosterone, which men have in much greater supply than women, and it's thought that these are related to aggressiveness. Hormones are hypothesized to have different effects on behavior based on the time of exposure. Some argue that prenatal exposure to high levels of testosterone influences later behavior by making the child more impulsive and more aggressive, although the specific behavior influence is not always clearly identified, just a general thought that children are more impulsive and aggressive in some manner is what this theory or those that advocate this relationship claim. Prenatal exposure to a hormone is referred to as organizational because it is thought to change the way the brain is organized by increasing the number of testosterone receptors in one's brain. Other people argue that hormones are most influential at puberty when large increases in hormone levels occur. Finally, a third sect of scientists argues that hormone levels continue to influence behavior from puberty through adulthood. It is actually unclear whether hormones cause changes in behavior at all, or whether they are consequences of a behavior, or both. Testosterone could increase aggression, or aggressive behavior could increase testosterone levels, or high testosterone levels could cause aggressive behavior and subsequently increase again as the result of that behavior. So we don't know if high testosterone levels may cause someone to, for instance, hit someone else, or if hitting someone else may cause the level of testosterone in a person's body to rise, or if a high level of testosterone in a person's body causes that person to, for instance, hit someone else, and then the act of hitting someone else further causes testosterone increases. If there's a relationship between aggression and testosterone, we don't know which of those three models is the correct model for that relationship. A study of Swedish boys found that testosterone levels were directly related to provoking aggressive behavior and indirectly related to unprovoked aggressive behavior by causing greater irritability and impatience. So there's some evidence that the existence of testosterone is what causes aggressive behavior, but not enough so that that evidence is conclusive and we can say that that is absolutely the directional causal relationship. Testosterone is measured by blood samples, but only a small bit of testosterone in the system can be measured. More recently, a saliva test has been developed, but the test cannot determine where in the body the testosterone is active, which is really important because we know testosterone is active in many places in the body, not just the brain. So from these saliva tests, we have trouble deciphering where the testosterone we are measuring is coming from. If it's coming in the brain, meaning that it could be affecting behavior, or if it is coming from elsewhere in the body where it is unlikely to be affecting aggressive behavior. A study of sex offenders demonstrated that those who were voluntarily castrated and thus had much lower levels of testosterone had much lower rates of recidivism, approximately a 3% rate of recidivism, versus those who did not, who had approximately a 46% rate of recidivism. A meta-analysis of the relationship between testosterone and aggression found that there was a small overall correlation between testosterone and aggression, and the correlation depended on whether saliva or blood tests were used to measure testosterone. Thus, it seems unlikely that testosterone alone is the cause of aggressive behavior and violence. There needs to be another factor based on this research that is at least acting in tandem with a high level of testosterone to be causing aggressive behavior. Perhaps there needs to be even more than one additional factor that interacts with a high level of testosterone to cause aggressive behavior. Based on the information we currently have, we don't know. Let's talk now about the biological trait theory of arousal. Fearlessness theory states that some criminals have low arousal, and thus the commission of crime is more likely because some criminal acts require a degree of fearlessness. Furthermore, it could be that some people do not react to negative stimuli as forcefully as others do, so they are less likely to want to avoid actions that result in negative consequences, such as the criminal justice system being predicated on making it irrational for criminals to commit crimes due to the consequences of those crimes. If the consequences are not very uncomfortable for some people, meaning people who have low arousal, it follows that those individuals make a different calculation and will choose to commit crime. So in short, these people are fearless of the consequences. The consequences don't matter as much to them. Stimulation-seeking theory states that individuals who are understimulated seek stimulation through crime. So this theory states that if you don't get enough stimulation through your normal daily activities, being in relationships with people, going skydiving, doing whatever other daring things that so-called normal people do, you will seek stimulation through illegal acts in order to be fulfilled biologically and get the stimulation your brain wants through committing those illegal acts. Finally, when we talk about arousal, one of the concerns that we have for theories involving arousal is measuring arousal. Arousal can be measured through brainwave patterns with EEGs, skin conductance of electricity, through tests like lie detector tests and tests that measure heart rate. Studies have found that certain EEG patterns predicted both incidences and frequency of thefts later on. Research finds that EEG levels are abnormal in about 20 to 50% of violent people, although only about 5 to 20% of normal people exhibit these same abnormalities. Some studies have also found that skin tests also predict criminal acts, but EEGs are the methods that are most frequently linked to criminal behavior. Additional evidence has pointed to those with low resting heart rates to be the most prone to aggressive behavior. A meta-analysis of studies concerning heart rate demonstrates that resting heart rate levels and stress heart rate levels are lower for antisocial children than for normal children, regardless of the age, gender, or method of measurement. Conversely, high arousal, high heartbeat levels are likely to result in it being very unlikely that an individual commits crimes. One implication of this research is that there is a link between arousal and crime, and thus such a link could be mediated by social or environmental factors, meaning those with low arousal could be purposefully stimulated into acceptable behaviors like sports that would similarly stimulate their brains but would not be criminal acts. This concludes part 1 of the lecture for this week. You'll need to go to the PowerPoint over part 2 for the second part of the lecture that deals with psychological trait theories and the measurement of trait theories.